With ongoing announcements from Microsoft and Google about integrating AI into the productivity suites most of us use, there are lots of things to be excited about, but also lots of things that might concern us. This is clearly heating up to be a battle between these two tech giants on who will rule the future of productivity. And right now, Google seems to be playing catch up. There are differences between the announcements both companies have made, but essentially they are highlighting a future where AI helps you to achieve more, whether it be summarizing emails or gaining insights from data or making your presentations richer, in Microsoft's parlance, as a Copilot for your workday. But one thing is abundantly clear for the services highlighted by both Microsoft and Google. The value you can derive from these new tools will be directly linked to the data those tools can access. For Microsoft 365 Copilot to be able to add the latest pricing information to your sales presentation, it needs to have access to that data. So where that data lives is going to be really important. Whether it's in a third-party system or printed out in a file on your desk, if Microsoft 365 Copilot can't see it, it cannot do anything with it. If content like this is useful to you, then I hope you'll like the video and subscribe to the channel so you can see the next time I put out a video like this. A couple of weeks ago, I released this video looking at my predictions around this issue, but I didn't touch on another vital and deeply connected topic that will also impact data access: governance. So what is governance? Well, governance is really the structure that an organisation uses to make sure its IT and data support it to achieve business objectives. Depending on a business's scale, there can be a fairly rudimentary approach to this issue, or at the enterprise level, robust procedures based upon established frameworks. At the heart of these, the goal is to ensure that IT provides the tools for a business to be successful while protecting it from risk related to security and compliance. In Microsoft 365, governance is an essential component for getting the most from your people, technology, and processes, and it encompasses the strategies and policies you enact alongside the culture you build to ensure you achieve the maximum possible while maintaining compliance and minimizing risk. The approach you take to governance should encompass all of what you do with data, including using it, storing it, sharing it, disclosing it to third parties, and ultimately, at the end of its life cycle, its destruction or erasure. At every step, it should be secured to ensure it's not lost, stolen, or misused. For many businesses, specific compliance standards will apply to some or all of the data held. Standards such as the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR in Europe, or the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or HIPAA in the US, or the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, or PCI DSS, which applies worldwide, may be some of the more common regulations you hear about. Where such regulations apply to a business, that compliance is required by law, and their governance strategies should assure that compliance. While security is not the same as compliance, having a clearly defined structure of who gets to see what and why is an important aspect of assuring compliance, and is therefore an aspect of governance from a policy and culture perspective. In your Microsoft 365 tenant, you have a rich fabric of tools to control such access on a user or group level, and to further restrict and report on what types of data are stored, where data can be shared, to manage retention or destruction, and to limit communication on certain topics or between certain groups within your organisation. Exploring all of these tools is outside the scope of this video, but there's a whole section of resources on the Microsoft 365 website overviewing these services that are now under the name Microsoft Purview. So the question is, what has this got to do with AI? Well, what we know about Microsoft 365 Copilot is still limited, but we do know that Microsoft has highlighted that this technology will deal with issues of data security and compliance in the same way as every other aspect of Microsoft 365. To quote Microsoft, "No change to Microsoft's existing commitments to data security and privacy in the enterprise. Copilot automatically inherits your customers' security, compliance, and privacy policies for Microsoft 365. At an individual user level, Copilot works like enterprise search today. It can access only data to which the user already has access, enforced by the same technology that we've been using for years to secure customer data in Microsoft 365 apps." The value you get from tools like Microsoft 365 Copilot or Google's equivalent will be driven directly by the data they have access to. If the last product catalogue stored in Microsoft 365 is from 2013, but you want Copilot to update pricing in your PowerPoint for the current year, then you're simply going to be out of luck. This makes sense, as we've discussed before, Copilot will leverage the Microsoft Graph to bring your unique content into the request being made to the AI large language model. This process is described as the Copilot model, and very clearly allows anyone with even rudimentary understanding of Microsoft 365 architecture to feel convinced of the merits of Microsoft's claims around its AI tool security. The graph gives you access to mountains of data, but it's very squarely in the security context of the user making the request. You simply cannot use a graph request to pull information from Microsoft 365 you don't have access to, so nor will Copilot be able to do this. In my previous video on whether your data is ready for Copilot, I focused on the barriers that third-party apps might create for the completeness of the data Copilot is able to leverage to do its job. This is an issue that neither Microsoft or Google, for their respective technologies, seem to have addressed in the announcements they've made to date. However, third-party apps are potentially only part of the problem that might exist. As for many organisations I work with, the picture of what data the Microsoft Graph says a particular user has access to doesn't entirely align with what they should be able to access or what they reasonably know. Depending on the culture of an organisation, an individual user might have access to far more than they need and avoid accessing it just on the honour system, or they might constantly have to struggle to get information to allow them to do the job, and often get it in ways that are less than ideal. Some time ago, I worked at an organisation where a colleague who was particularly concerned about security, and evidently had some trust issues, would outright refuse to share information that others needed to do their job, and reasonably, per the policies of the organisation, should have access to. Where she did share that information, she often did so in ways that were a bit chaotic. For example, she would bring a paper copy of a document to a meeting and let you read it in the meeting, but then take it back. Bearing in mind that we weren't working for the CIA, this was way over the top, but she was senior enough to get away with this behaviour, whether it followed the policy or not. In this case, as an employee, I knew information that the Microsoft Graph said I didn't have access to. But as a human, using the best of my memory skills, I could gain further value from this information, integrating it into other communications or documents. Unfortunately, Copilot or similar technologies simply won't have this capability, and the facts it writes or conclusions it draws won't benefit from knowledge that you might not even remember how you acquired. On the other end of the scale, I recently worked with an organisation that simply had a file share. No demarcation of access level or other security depending on a person's role or seniority or any other factor. Everyone had access to everything, and there was just trust that no one was going to do anything wrong with that access. And while this isn't an advisable IT security strategy, and it's just not satisfactory if you have certain compliance needs, this is the case for many smaller organisations, and for many of them it has worked fine for many years. But unless Microsoft or Google have come up with some revolutionary innovation we haven't heard about yet, tools like Copilot aren't going to follow the honour system on the files they look at. They'll either have access or they won't. So you might cry that this is no different than search, but it kind of is. As even if someone searches for something, they still have a choice as to whether they trawl through the document or not. And frankly, for the organisations I see where this type of all-access security is the case, the merits of modern search also haven't reached the masses either. Additionally, this is a rather extreme example. Most organisations don't have everyone being able to see everything, but frequently, unintentionally, some users have access to things they really don't need in order to do their job. Both of these are governance issues. The IT security evident across systems is not representative of being aligned with the delivery of business objectives, and the culture around the use and sharing of data is not where you would want it to be to balance productivity with protection. From a purely technical perspective, Microsoft 365 does have some tools up its sleeve when it comes to these kinds of issues that potentially allow any organisation with the right licenses applied to enact a bit of a spring clean of data access well before Microsoft Copilot comes online. If you have Azure Active Directory Premium P2, you can implement access reviews. An access review can enlist a group owner or users to review the access that they have to resources and confirm that the access is still necessary and aligned with the needs that exist. This allows you to do a self-service review of who has access to what, and is really powerful, particularly in situations where it's not just your internal users who have access to resources, but it's guests outside of your organization as well. SharePoint Syntex is one of Microsoft's existing AI tools, bringing the power of document classification and recognition that you may be familiar with from Power Platform AI Builder to SharePoint. One of the capabilities of this platform is to automatically apply retention and sensitivity labels to content, which can be an important weapon in battling the potential misuse of data within an organization. While this doesn't necessarily change who is directly able to access what, it does provide some limitations on what can be done with it in terms of making sure that data is got rid of after a certain period of time, or that it can't be shared outside of your organization. So it does provide some guardrails that can be used to improve the situations that I've highlighted. But while technical solutions like this are very useful, they don't address the root of the entire challenge I've outlined. This video is presented through the context of the Microsoft 365 Copilot or similar AI tool lens, and thinking about data access and other governance issues from that perspective makes sense. However, all this thought process serves to do is to highlight weaknesses that might already exist in your data governance and give you another reason to seek to fix them. While the success of AI might be deeply connected to data access, so too is the success of modern collaboration without any AI involved at all. We know that information workers spend too much time looking for information and even recreating content they can't find. And while some of this is down to problems like my old colleague who thought she was a secret agent, mostly it's just down to having things set up in the wrong way or having no policies in place. So ultimately, for your business's compliance, security, and collaborative culture, you should be active in ensuring you have effective policies and procedures in place to allow every employee to have access to the information that allows them to perform best in their job. When AI tools like Microsoft 365 Copilot are rolled out, the access these tools have to your company data are likely to be entirely within the context of an individual user's own access. But given that these tools are aimed at amplifying the productivity of individuals instead of doing some separate task, if they have the right access, so too will those AI tools. Outside of data access, there are other issues around AI that need to be considered within the scope of good governance. Considering impacts like biases that might exist in your historic data, or how to deal with intellectual property that's generated through the use of AI, are issues that organisations will need to grapple. But those that already have good governance standards in place will find it easier to adapt to these new concerns, while also enjoying greater efficacy from the rollout of AI tools, from the certainty that individual users have the right access to companies' data to do their job effectively. For everyone else, this is a time to think about whether you need to overhaul your IT governance to make it more effective for the priorities of today and those that are on the horizon for tomorrow. I hope this has been a useful overview and expansion on the videos I've made on this topic previously. I'd really like to hear in the comments what your concerns are about governance when it comes to the AI tools that are going to start to roll out in our businesses. Is this something that a lot of people are changing their approach to, or are you just fortifying the approach that you've already taken in the past? Please leave a comment below. I will continue updating on these kinds of issues, and until the next video, bye bye.